Alright, welcome back. In this tutorial, we are going to be looking at how to export your Blender model out and have it prepared correctly for use in Augment. So that will involve various things from checking dimensions, placement of the model, orienting it correctly in space, and also checking that certain export options are active and correct for when we send it out. So we're going to get a few things rigged in the system. First off, what we want to do is make sure that our model is facing correct directions for this part. We should be fairly well set up correctly based on working with preparing the file for Photoshop and making the still images. So our model should be facing good directions for the moment. Because we're going to change those though. But what we're going to do while we're in the midst of that, we're going to change a few things, and hold on, some of my features are not turned on correctly here, so I'm just going to flip a few features on. Alright, so some of the first things that we want to do here is the first thing we want to do is check the overall dimensional quality of our sculpture to understand how big it actually is based on a cubic area. So, and that will be used by Augment later. So we want to take note of the number that it gives us for that information. So first off, to do that, we're going to actually make a duplicate of all of our objects that are part of our model. Again, that does not include things like the empty object, the camera, or the lighting systems inside of our scene. Only the physical models that are a part of our scene. So what I'm going to do is go through my outliner panel over here on the right side of the screen, and I'm going to go through and select each of my objects. Again, everything that you have in your scene at this point ought to be a mesh object. If it's not yet, we'll make sure in a step during this exercise to convert it over. But I'm going to go through and select all my object components only. So I'm going to hold Shift, select this one, my Bezier curve. I'm going to also select my metaball surface and the monkey, Suzanne. So now they're all highlighted, and the shortcut typically for duplicating all objects is Shift-D. So I'm going to move my mouse out here and hit Shift-D, and it highlights everything white, which means that it's selected, and if you just move your mouse, a duplicate will pop out. So I'm going to just move it in the top view away from my original model and drop it. And then I'm going to combine all of these duplicates together into a single file layer on the outliner. This is important that you do it with a duplicate because it could ruin anything you need to still do with your original. So to combine everything or join them, we're going to use the shortcuts Control and J. And notice that when I do Control J, everything now has an orange outline around it on my duplicate. It also shows a single layer that represents this entire model now. So now we can actually do what we need to represent the full dimensional area. So to read the full dimensional area for this object, we're going to switch our viewing mode of the object into a bounding box, just so you can see what it looks like visually, and how 3D programs understand the dimensional area of objects. Go down to your shader menu and use the bounding box option. And when you turn on bounding box, it will change the visualization of your objects to cubes. What this shows is the outer boundaries that your object will reach based on the height, width, and depth inside the scene. And so that shows me the boundary area for my entire model scene area. So to determine what the scale of this is, you can't use the normal scale parameters because these are based on Blender units. We need actual dimensions. So we need to make sure a setting is set up to read actual dimensions or physical world dimensions. So come over to your property panel over on the right and select this icon that looks like a sphere, a cylinder, and a light. This is your scene properties. Go down to where it says units. And under units, I'm going to select imperial for my measurement system. I'm using imperial because I understand feet and inches. You may be more familiar with metric. That's, again, centimeters or millimeters. So use whichever is familiar to you. Those numbers do communicate into Augment either way. They'll allow you to use either unit system. So I'm going to have imperial. And I'm going to pull up a separate menu on screen, a submenu, by pressing the N key, N as in negative. And this will pop up over here on the side. And again, all I did was press the N key. And what I want to look under is this separate panel that says Transform. And there's a spot here for my object selection that says Dimensions. And what you'll notice immediately is it gives you the exact dimensions of this cubic area based on its x, y, and z. And it tells me how big it is for each axis. So it's 23 feet by 17 feet by 17 feet. Now that's a very massive object. For our augment system, we really want something that's down to about a 1 foot range max in terms of maximum dimension. So we need to make this whole scene much, much smaller. So that being said, we know how big our actual scene is now. And we're going to go and we're going to scale down this object first to understand the overall scale that we need to change our main scene element object to. And when I scale it down, we're going to watch this scale value over here and this value. So I'm going to hit the SC in the top view, or the S key, shortcut for scale, and then drag this handle in. And I'm watching the dimension values right now in this panel over on the right to make sure that my value, my maximum dimension, gets to about a foot. Now you can always make it a little bigger, but I'm going to bring it down to about 12 inches. So I got a long ways to go. If you get too close in, it starts getting jittery. You may want to click, move your mouse further away from your object in the top view, hit S again, and then slowly drag in until you get down to your largest dimension being about 1 foot. And everything's within a 1 foot range on mine, so that's pretty good. I'm going to leave it right there. And what I can also notice from doing this is that the overall values of scale for my selection has dropped to 0.058 for the Blender units. So what I'm going to do is leave that there for a minute. And I'm going to go in and select all of my original objects in my original scene. I'm going to switch back to solid and just hold down shift, and I'm going to select each of these. And I'm going to scale this particular object down to 0.058. I'm just going to type these in numerically. Now notice that as I do that, it's actually only scaling one object at a time. This may not be useful enough to do it that way, that we may just need to do a main scale out here, so I'll hold down S and then drag it down until I get to 0.058. Again, you may have to scale it multiple times, so click till you get too close and then move your mouse away, hit S again, and keep scaling down. Again, we want it to 0.058 is right about where we need it to make our size of our model appropriate. And it should be exactly the same scale as our duplicate that's way out here in space. Now we don't need our duplicate anymore, so we can just delete that, which in my screen it's based on the last object you selected when you combine them, so it's Suzanne 0.001. So I'm just going to hit X on the keyboard and delete that object out. Alright, now that I have that object deleted, I am going to go ahead and move my main object back into screen. It's important to note the Y value for your object. Remember, we said it was about a foot when we were looking at our duplicate a minute ago. So make sure to keep that in mind whenever you're rescaling for augment later. That value will become important. Okay, so we've grabbed all of our scene items, and I'm just going to hit A a couple times to grab everything. And I'm going to relocate my object back at the center origin point over my grid, which is the intersection of the green and the red line on the top view. So I'm going to grab it, drag it over that area, and drop it down.